Everyone. My name is Tobias, and I will be in my ninth month on T, I think, as of this coming. That day is it? Maybe a week from now, I guess. But this is not a video that's about that. Actually, I have been meaning to make this video for a really long time. I think it was back in like May, plus or minus a couple weeks, that I mentioned wanting to do a name video about the origin of my name. Why did I choose Tobias? And so that's the hope for today. Yay. Um, so what led me to pick Tobias anyway? Um, this seems like a really obvious question, or that the answer is obvious, but there are a couple factors that were at play. Um, Not all of this really stemmed from my transition. In fact, for a lot of my life, I actually didn't really like the name that I was given at birth to begin with. So, one of my earliest memories, actually, because I didn't know what other name I would choose for myself, is telling a ballet teacher that I wanted to be called Pegasus. Like, that's kind of the extent to which I didn't want to deal with my name. Um, Over the years, I've dealt with literally every mispronunciation of my birth name under the sun. Like, you would not imagine that so many ways to fuck up a name are possible, but they are. Even if it's spelled like it sounds, which is a common comment that I've gotten from people over the years who have gotten it right. Um, Other than that, it was a name that was fairly uncommon in the United States where I'm living, and it was one that is exclusively seen as feminine in the culture of origin. So I was raised Jewish, and I had a very Jewish name and a very feminine Jewish name. I was constantly fielding invasive, exoticizing questions about like my heritage and where it was from, and it just gets frustrating to deal with after the 10th person asks you, pretty much. You know what I mean? And I had about 26 years of that. So I have been searching on and off probably for my entire life without really committing to it. I mean, it's your name, it's the name that your parents gave you, and when you are, as much as I was, kind of tied to the whims and wishes of your parents, getting rid of your name seemed like an impossible prospect. Um, but I really ramped up my search, I want to say around spring of this year, because I just got to a point where between transition and general self esteem and where I was at in life, continuing to have only a name that brought me so much dissatisfaction and dysphoria, frankly, was getting to be excruciating. So I made a concerted effort beginning sometime between like January and March to search for a new name. Um, Friends of mine will tell you that over the years I've picked up and dropped many aliases. None of them really seem to stick. And so it was a fear of mine that I would choose something and then it would just kind of be the latest like flavor of the day that I didn't commit to. I was really wanting to find something I could commit to this time. So, in order to make that process a little bit easier, I came up with a list of criteria. So, as I've mentioned, and just to recap, I have some Jewish heritage, so I was interested, if possible, in a biblical name. Oh, I forgot to mention one feature of my old name that I didn't really like is that there weren't really any good nicknames for it. There weren't any good short forms. And so I was hoping for something that I could experience a nickname with. My old name was specifically chosen and curated so that you couldn't make it into a nickname. And I guess I found that really frustrating. Um, so I wanted something that was relatively common, that shortened to a relatively common nickname. Something that would be not exotic sounding to English speaking ears. Um, and as well, I wanted something that was not only like gender neutral or the nickname gender neutral, but something more masculine leaning, because it seems to me that as an AFAB person that is assigned female, it I have to work twice as hard to get people to see me any other way. And so I wanted my name not to be like completely hampering that effort. Um, the other thing is that, and I feel a little self conscious saying this, I wanted something that wasn't in the top like 10 things that genderqueer people tend to name themselves. So, one of the first names that I tried out casually and then quickly abandoned a couple of years ago was Kaden. You probably see this everywhere. Um, Another one that I was considering before was Remy, and I'll talk a little bit more about Remy in a moment. But I scoured the internet like many late night binges of anxiety were spent on baby name sites and name generators and stuff like that. And as it turns out, the name that I chose is a name that I already liked from early in my childhood. I just never thought to apply it to myself. There's a fiction series called Animorphs. That was the first time that I had ever seen the name Tobias. And I really liked it from that point. And again, I never conceived to use it for myself pretty much until I decided that I couldn't keep going on using a name that made me upset every time I heard it. So to go back to my criteria, I was really feeling kind of stumped trying to get something that would fit all of my criteria and be somewhat recognizable as like a Jewish name. In the end, I boiled it down to two. I was interested in Remiel or in Tobias. So the first one that I actually tried was Remiel. I don't know why, it just kind of called to me, but quickly, another criteria that I hadn't thought about was that it needed to be a name that, because it was recognizable, everyone wasn't going to fuck up for me all the time. So I walked into work, tried on the name Remiel, and was quickly and swiftly confronted with Ramiel, which is not the name that I chose. And so that name lasted about 24 hours before I started with Tobias. And Tobias, believe it or not, is biblical. There's a book of Tobias in the Bible. It's a little bit apocryphal, so it's not in the major canon of either the New Testament or the Old. But there is a minor character, Tobias, I think, who appears in the Old Testament as well. I'm not remembering his role right now, but it'll come to me. And as a matter of fact, there's a character in Fiddler on the Roof whose name is Tevye, and as it turns out, Tevye is Yiddish for Tobias. And every Indo-European language, it seems, has some version of Tobias in it. And so the more I learned about the name, the more I really liked it, and the more that it really stuck and stayed with me. And of course, the obvious short form for Tobias is Toby. I do use Toby pretty frequently in my daily life. But with that said, anything from like Tobmeister to Tobinator to Tobes or like stuff like that, any and all nicknames I've really come to embrace. There are only like 3 possible ways that I've had Tobias mispronounced, and because it's relatively consistent, it doesn't piss me off the way that mispronunciations of my old name used to. So there's Tobias, there's Tobias, there's Tobias, and there's Tobias. Those are basically the 4 major pronunciations that I've heard of the name. And I like all of them, so it doesn't bother me when people use one that isn't technically how I pronounce it. And there you go. That is the story of Tobias. I know that also Tobias was one of the names back in like the 40s or something like that. There was a trend of using traditionally masculine names for people assigned female. And I had heard that Toby and Tobias went through a heyday like that. And so it met my other criteria of being masculine leaning, but not exclusively in the territory of men. Especially Toby, when I use the short form, that feels very neutral to me, and it feels good. And so I settled into using Tobias. I think I announced that on a video a couple of months back as well. And getting people into using it in my daily life has been kind of a mixed bag. Pretty much none of my adoptive family calls me that, unless it's like cousins my generation who are speaking only to me and not in the company of my parents. And frankly, like, I've gotten such a poor response to the times that I've come out. in the past that it's made me hesitant to actually like explore and police using it with like older generation, like aunts and uncles and so forth. So that's been really sad. But because of the flack that I was getting, it in part drove me to make it legal. So that is now my legal name as of about a month ago. And I'm still in the process of getting all my stuff updated. But so far, so good. So I'm officially Tobias on paper as well as in spirit. And I'm pretty happy here. Thanks for watching, and as always, let me know if you have any questions, comments, concerns, etc. I'm a pretty open book. I'll try to get an update video, a more general update video, on the 9-month anniversary of my starting tea. But until then,